The moment that changed my life didn't happen in a boardroom or under bright city lights. It happened on an ordinary afternoon when my coffee had gone cold, my hands were shaking, and my coworkers were watching me like a jury waiting for a verdict. I didn't know it then, but one brave step forward was about to unravel years of fear, quiet longing, and the kind of love that only grows in silence. Before the story pulls you deeper, let me pause for a heartbeat. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet courage it takes to change your life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel, The Kindness Chronicles. Your support keeps stories like this alive. I had worked at the company for almost 4 years, long enough to learn the rhythm of the office and the invisible rules that everyone pretended didn't exist. Deadlines ruled our days, coffee ruled our mornings, and stress ruled everything else. But above all of it was her. My boss. Calm, sharp, composed in a way that made the room feel steadier whenever she walked in. She wasn't the kind of leader who raised her voice or demanded attention. She commanded respect through consistency, fairness, and an empathy that made even the hardest days survivable. From the first month I joined, I noticed the way she listened. Not the polite nodding kind, but real listening, the kind where you felt seen. I told myself it was admiration, nothing more. Respect for a woman who had clearly fought to earn her place. I buried anything softer, warmer, or more dangerous under professionalism. Office crushes were foolish. Office romances were disasters. I had seen enough cautionary tales to know better. But feelings don't ask permission. They arrived quietly, in the way she remembered my mother was ill and asked about her weeks later, in the way she trusted me with difficult projects, in the way she smiled when our eyes met across the conference table and quickly looked away. I noticed how her laugh softened the room, how she stayed late just like I did, how sometimes we shared silence that felt heavier than conversation. Still, I told myself it was nothing. I was an employee. She was my boss. End of story. Except stories don't always end where logic wants them to. My coworkers noticed before I admitted anything to myself. They noticed how I volunteered for tasks that meant working closely with her, how I defended her decisions when others complained, how my mood lifted whenever she walked by my desk. At first, they teased gently, then relentlessly. I denied it every time, laughing it off, pretending my heart didn't race whenever she said my name. One Friday evening, after a brutal week of deadlines and late nights, the office thinned out until only a handful of us remained. Someone ordered takeout. Someone else joked about how we practically lived there. The atmosphere loosened, laughter bouncing off the walls like it hadn't all week. That's when the dare came. Half joking, half serious, wrapped in friendly cruelty. They said if I was so confident, so devoted, I should prove it. I should ask her out. The words landed like a thunderclap. My chest tightened, my mouth went dry, and suddenly every fear I had buried clawed its way to the surface. Losing my job. Being humiliated. Making things awkward forever. Crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. I tried to deflect, to joke, to change the subject, but they wouldn't let it go. They said life was short. They said I deserved happiness. They said she looked at me differently too. That I laughed, but my heart was pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. All weekend, the dare followed me like a shadow. I replayed every interaction we'd ever had, searching for signs, warnings, anything. I argued with myself in the mirror, telling myself to be sensible, to be grateful for what I had. But another voice, quieter and more persistent, asked what if? What if this was the moment everything changed? Monday arrived with cruel normalcy. Emails. Meetings. Coffee. She greeted me the same way she always did, professional warmth, a quick smile. And yet something felt different. Or maybe I was different, carrying the weight of a decision that refused to be ignored. The day dragged on. By late afternoon, my nerves were raw. I told myself I wouldn't do it. I told myself the dare was stupid. Then, just as I was packing up to leave, she asked if I had a minute. Her tone was neutral, but my heart sank anyway. I followed her to her office, every step feeling heavier than the last. The door closed behind us, and the familiar space suddenly felt unfamiliar. She asked about a project. I answered automatically, barely hearing my own voice. There was a pause, a silence that stretched too long. I could have left then. I should have left then. Instead, something inside me broke open. I told her I needed to say something, and that it might be inappropriate, and that she could stop me at any time. My voice shook. I admitted I respected her deeply, that working with her had changed me, that somewhere along the way my feelings had grown into something I could no longer pretend didn't exist. I said I understood if it complicated things, if it changed nothing, if she wanted me to forget I'd ever spoken. I didn't look at her while I spoke. I couldn't. I stared at a spot on the carpet, bracing myself for rejection, for silence, for consequences. What followed was not what I expected. She didn't interrupt. She didn't recoil. She let the silence breathe. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. She said she had been waiting. Waiting for honesty. Waiting for courage. Waiting for me to see that the connection I felt wasn't one-sided. She explained that she had kept her distance on purpose, that boundaries mattered, that power dynamics were real, and that she had never wanted to put me in a position where I felt pressured or confused. She said she admired my work, my integrity, and the way I treated people. She admitted that her own feelings had surprised her, and that she had spent many nights questioning them, pushing them aside for the sake of professionalism. But feelings, she said, don't disappear just because we tell them to. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. Not joy exactly, but release. Years of tension melting into something warm and frightening and beautiful all at once. We talked for a long time, carefully, honestly, about what this could mean and what it could not. About boundaries, about transparency, about doing things the right way or not at all. We agreed not to rush. We agreed to protect our work and our team. We agreed that if we took this step, it would be with intention and respect. Walking out of her office that evening, the world felt sharper, brighter, like someone had turned up the saturation on my life. My coworkers watched me with wide eyes, waiting for a sign. I didn't say a word. I just smiled. The weeks that followed were not a fairy tale montage. They were complicated. We were careful in the office, professional to a fault. Sometimes it hurt to pretend, to pass each other in the hallway like strangers when everything inside me wanted to reach out. Rumors surfaced anyway, as they always do, and we faced them with honesty and clear boundaries. Outside of work, something slow and steady began to grow. Conversations that lasted for hours. Walks that turned into confessions. Shared stories of past failures, heartbreaks, and the invisible scars we both carried. I learned about the pressure she lived under, the loneliness of leadership, the expectations that never seemed to ease. She learned about my insecurities, my fear of not being enough, my habit of shrinking myself to avoid disappointment. Love didn't arrive like a lightning strike. It arrived like dawn, gradually, undeniably. There were moments of doubt. Days when the weight of judgment felt heavy. Nights when I wondered if we were being foolish. But every time I looked at her, really looked, I knew the risk was worth it. Not because it was easy, but because it was honest. The real challenge wasn't the office or the rules or what people might say. The real challenge was believing that I deserved something this good. That I was allowed to step out of my fear and into a life that felt fuller than the one I had settled for. Over time, we made changes. Clear structures. New reporting lines. Transparency with leadership. It wasn't perfect, but it was respectful. The company adapted. So did we. Months later, I thought back to that dare, to the laughter and pressure and fear that had pushed me to the edge of my comfort zone. I realized that sometimes courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers, telling you that staying silent is the greater risk. If this story has stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a moment you were afraid to take, please pause for a second. Like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to The Kindness Chronicles. And if it truly touched your heart, I ask you emotionally, sincerely, to engage with this video. Your support turns stories into shared hope. Before we end, leave a comment below and tell us this one line: what would you dare yourself to do if fear wasn't in the way? Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is speak the truth you've been carrying quietly for far too long.